Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gemma and today I'm going to give you 10 historical fiction recommendations centred around World War II that aren't about the UK or the US. So, as many of you may know, Katie from Books and Things is hosting a historical fiction readathon this month, and one of her prompts was to read a book from a favourite time period, and it got the old cogs whirring. And one of my favourite time periods to read about is World War II, but particularly as I have read more World War II fiction, I find that I want to read World War II fiction from different perspectives. World War II from US and UK perspectives are very done, and so I have got 10 books here that I've read that are not from those countries, that are from different countries, that give you a different view, a different sort of insight into World War II, and certainly for me, an insight that I was not taught at school. So the books that I have for you today, I have two that are told from an Italian perspective, one told from a Russian perspective, two from a Polish perspective, one from a German perspective, two from French, and two from Japanese. So buckle in, guys. I'm going to tell you about some great historical fiction that I've really enjoyed. So let's start with Italy, shall we? The first book I want to recommend from an Italian perspective is Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan. So in this book, we follow a young boy in the beginning, Pino Lella, and he is growing up in Italy as the war sort of starts to take hold. And I personally knew very little about Mussolini and his impact on the war, and also the divide in Italy. There was quite a significant divide in what side people were on, and we follow Pino as he works to get people across the line into Switzerland, and things start to escalate for him. I really enjoyed this book, and I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a little bit more of an insight into that side of the war. The other book that I read that's set or with an Italian slant on it is The Road to Ruin by Gemma Liviero. So in this, we're not actually in Italy really at all, but we are following an Italian soldier who has been fighting at the front, and we see what happens to him almost immediately after the war, when things for Germany have obviously gone very wrong, and he is trying to return to Italy, and it's about his journey back into Italy and what happens along the way. This is quite an easy read, but I really enjoyed it, and it was from an author that I don't really hear many people talking about, and I thought she did a fantastic job. There was quite a lot of sort of like family secret stuff that was uncovered, and again, it's sort of, you have some flashbacks to the main character's past where you can sort of see this fracture in Italy between the people who are in agreement with Germany and the people who are in agreement with the Allies, and what that means for people and their families, etc. So yes, highly recommend this one as another perspective from Italy. The next one I'm going to talk about is from a Russian perspective, and that is The Winter Garden by Kristin Hannah. Now, if you've been here a while, you'll know Kristin Hannah is one of my favourite authors, particularly her more recent work. And in this book, we have a split timeline. So we're following two daughters in America. Their mother was in Russia during the war, and she is very closed off to them. And we sort of follow this journey following the death of their father as these two daughters try to understand her mother and uncover what happened to her in Russia. And yeah, there was a lot of historical stuff that I wasn't aware of in there. The Siege of Leningrad, for example, I'd heard of it, but I didn't really know anything about it, and you sort of see it from a Russian perspective, and it was fantastic. Another tearjerker, and this is very much a slow build, this book, so you don't really get any payout till quite near the end, but the way it's built means that the payout is so worth it. So yeah, I highly recommend this one, and it's definitely a an area that I'm keen to know more about, the Russian influence in the war and the Russian influence in Poland as well, following the war and all that dynamic, which really has only come to light for me in recent years. So yes, highly recommend that one. Okay, we're going to move to Poland now. I think that's quite a nice tie-in. So the first I would like to discuss is Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly. So we actually have three perspectives in this. We have an American woman, we have a German doctor at, I've forgotten the name of the work camp. I'll put it up on the screen. And we have a young Polish girl. And really the Polish narrative is probably the main narrative, which is why I've put it here. Yeah, we sort of see what happens in Poland as the war builds, what that means for the people, and then obviously we follow this woman as she goes to this work camp and what that is like for her and the ramifications of that afterwards. And it was really eye-opening. And there was actually another book that was sort of like recommended reading called The Rabbits. I can't remember the author of it, but I've got it on my Kindle, which follows sort of what happens within this specific camp, which I can't remember the name of. And yeah, so I will hopefully be getting to that one too, to give me a bit more sort of background on what happened there. So yeah, I think this was a fantastic book, and Martha Hall Kelly does have another couple of books in this series that I have one on my shelf, and I will get to them at some point. The other one, based in Poland, is a non-fiction graphic memoir. I'm sure after saying that, many of you will be able to guess the book I'm talking about, and that is Mouse by Art Speigleman. So I read this one last year, and Art Speigleman sort of interviews his father and then tells us the story of what happened to his father as Poland was invaded and occupied, and his father was sent to Auschwitz. And the drawings are all done really interestingly. So all the people are depicted as animals. So Jewish people are mice, German Nazi soldiers are cats, and there are, I think, Polish non-Jews are pigs. But it's just an interesting way of depicting it. And again, this book taught me a lot about what it was like being a Jew in Poland at that time and what those people went through, and it was brilliantly done, and I highly recommend it. If you haven't read a graphic memoir before, this is probably quite a good place to start. I think it was really accessible, really easy to understand and sort of move through, and yeah, I thought it was excellent. An excellent book. Okay, let's move to Germany now, and The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas by John Boyne. So this is a really interesting perspective, because in here we are following a young boy who is living just outside the gates, the fence of Auschwitz. His father is a member of the Third Reich and involved in the concentration camp. But we're seeing this through the eyes of a young boy who doesn't really understand what's going on, and he befriends another boy of a similar age who's on the other side of the fence. And yeah, it's quite a harrowing story to read. The film is also very good if you haven't seen it. I thought it was a very different way of looking at the war through a German child's eyes, because, you know, no one is born inherently bad. And yeah, I highly recommend that one if you haven't picked it up. And it's actually quite a short novel, so it packs quite a punch in quite a short page count. Okay, let's move to France. Let's go to France now. Now, I know there are quite a lot of books set in France around World War II, but I really quite like reading about that and about the occupation of France and the effect that had on the people there. So there's two books here that I want to talk about. The first one is The Girl You Left Behind by Jojo Moyes. Again, this is split timeline. A lot of historical fiction seems to be split timeline these days. And we follow someone in a modern day who is looking at some artwork and trying to like work it back to its origins. And then we go back to where its origins are in occupied France, and we see what it's like for a young woman who is running a like a hotel, a tavern there, and she gets some attention from the Nazis who like to come there and eat, and she's almost ostracised from the community a little bit because the Germans are coming and eating food at her place. And yeah, it's probably an easier read than a lot of the books that I've mentioned before, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great, and yeah, would recommend. The other one set in France is going to be no surprise to a lot of you. It's The Nightingale by Kristin. This is my favourite book of all time, but it is a real heartbreaker. So in this we follow two sisters, Isabelle and Vienne, and they are very, very different characters. Isabelle is young and naive and quite arrogant, and Vienne is older and a bit cynical and a bit grumpy. And it's about what happens when France is occupied, how those two sisters deal with that situation very, very differently. And yeah, I basically sobbed my heart out from about 50% of the way through the book to the end. It's also sort of told as a flashback. So one of the sisters at the beginning is telling the story, and you don't find out which sister it is until the end. And that was a great payout. So yeah, obviously I highly recommend that one. I may have said that for all of these because I really like them all. And then the last country that I want to talk about is Japan. So I'm not going to labour the point because I've talked about this book quite a lot lately, but Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. This is a sweeping family saga. So this takes place from sort of the 1920s through to the 1980s-ish. But obviously within that we do have the Second World War. It doesn't take up the whole of the book, but it is in there, and the bombing of Nagasaki is featured within the book as well. And it was interesting to read it within that context, and also as a Korean immigrant in Japan and what that meant for them. So yeah, you're not going to get loads and loads of World War II out of this, but it does feature, and I thought it was quite interesting, and it taught me a little bit about what was happening there. The other one, again, maybe slightly off topic, but The Woman in the White Kimono by Anna Johns. And this actually follows, this is slightly after the Second World War. So again, split timeline. And in this we're following the daughter of a soldier who was sort of sent to Japan at the end of the war to sort of sort things out. An American soldier. And we look back at, she finds some letters on his death, and she goes over to investigate what happens, and it's about his relationship with a Japanese woman and what happened between them and what happened when all the soldiers were sort of shipped back out again. So it's more to do with the fallout of World War II in Japan than actually the war itself. But again, this was a heartbreaking book, and I would recommend it to anyone. So that's the 10 books that I wanted to talk to you about, I believe. Yes, it is. As I say, I really enjoyed all of these. If you have any recommendations for me on other books that are set in World War II from sort of different perspectives, I would very much appreciate you letting me know in the comments what they are. If you've read any of these and agree or passionately disagree, you know I like to chat in the comments. And if you haven't seen it, my top 10 historical fiction novels of all time is right here if you want to check that out. Okay, cheers guys, bye.